What's up, YouTubers? This is Ernie. We're going to be doing something a little bit different than usual. We're going to be talking about Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars from 1984 by Jim Schooter. What we're going to be doing is we're A, going to be breaking down the story, B, seeing how the story has aged since it came out, and C, figuring out whether or not it was even worth the time to read. So sit back and relax while I tell you all about Secret Wars. So, Secret Wars was one of the first major crossover events in the Marvel Comics universe. Technically, I think it was Contest of Heroes came before it, but it was a shorter and smaller comic book event. Secret Wars is a 12-part crossover event, not to be confused with the recent 2015 version of Secret Wars, which I think may have been a course correction or maybe going back and fixing some stuff that... Anyway, not important, but there are a ton of callbacks in that series and some similarities that I'll point out whenever appropriate. Secret Wars is a landmark storyline, but man, it has not aged well at all. Mostly because this was intended to coincide with a full-scale toy line by Mattel, and they wanted new costumes, new vehicles, bases, and enemies, and everything, the works. Everything. They wanted new everything. Things just kind of happen and appear for no good goddamn reason. Jim Shooter's writing pretty much says, hey, just go with it because comic books. The whole story kicks off with a bunch of Marvel superheroes, and I'm going to go ahead and list them off real quick, so I'm going to take a deep breath. Wasp, She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau version, Captain America, Thor, Hawkeye, Iron Man, Professor X, Storm, Nightcrawler, Rogue, Cyclops, Wolverine, Colossus, Hulk, Spider-Man, Mr. Fantastic, The Thing, and Human Torch. Okay, and we're not done yet because on the villain side, we have, deep breath, Enchantress, Ultron, the Absorbing Man, the Wrecking Crew comprised of the Wrecker, Thunderball, Piledriver, Bulldozer. We also have Kang the Conqueror, Galactus, the Lizard, Dr. Octopus, the Molecule Man, and Dr. Doom. It's hilarious because the villains are on one ship, the heroes on the other, and Magneto is present. And that's why I didn't mention him with the villains earlier, because he's not with the villains. He's with the heroes, which is something that technically will come up later. Both sides are highly mistrustful of one another. I don't mean just like, the villains don't trust the good guys, or the good guys don't trust the bad guys. I mean like the good guys don't trust the good guys. Like, if you thought the whole, the good guys don't get along trope was a new thing, forget it. This has been going on since the beginning, and it's going to be a running theme throughout the entire 12-issue run of Secret Wars. Villains aren't off the hook either. Ultron goes loose cannon within the first several pages and becomes the first casualty of the series thanks to Galactus vaporizing him without lifting more than a couple of fingers. They find out pretty quickly that the reason they are all present is thanks to the Beyonder, a brand new, never-before-seen character in the Marvel Universe. He's basically the most powerful entity in the Marvel Universe at the time. He could pretty much change reality as he saw fit. He could destroy the indestructible. He could create anything that he wished. He's been incredibly depowered since this series ran because Jim Schooter left Marvel. But at the time, he was the most powerful entity in Marvel, and he was powerful enough to create Battleworld, a planet created in the blink of an eye for Earth's mightiest heroes and its most dastardly foes to do battle. This is pretty much a Hunger Games setup from the get-go, or maybe more Battle Royale. The Beyonder tells everyone in attendance they must battle to the bitter end, and whosoever stands victorious when all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared will be granted all their heart's desires. Galactus isn't amused by this, though. He wants his heart's desires fulfilled right then and there, and decides he's ready to end the Beyonder before he even gets started. And Dr. Doom joins in on the fun, only for both him and Galactus to be summarily smacked down. Not long afterwards, the heroes spend a good chunk of time arguing over who not to trust. The Avengers are suspicious of the mutants, the entire group is suspicious of Magneto, and the Fantastic Four are just kind of there. The more disturbing development is that at the time of this comic, Wasp was the leader of the Avengers, not Captain America. But for the sake of the story and the accompanying toy line, she defers to Cap. And I'm using quotey fingers here when I say that, but this is just the first of many awkward, did that just really happen moments? Like, as I said before, this book has not aged well at all. Meanwhile, the villains are in a similar mess. No one trusts each other, but more importantly, no one trusts Dr. Doom. These guys go back and forth, double-crossing each other throughout the entire story. It's about as bad as a Pirates of the Caribbean film when it comes to double and triple crossing, which you'd expect from a villain, but it's almost excessive. I will say, for a toy tie-in comic book, they did a lot of character arcs and development, but some of it is so ham-fisted that it's hard to tell whether or not to take any of it seriously. Hulk, at this point in the comics timeline, has regained intelligence while in Hulk form, and more importantly, Bruce Banner's intelligence. Not just like a smart, savage Hulk. No, he literally has Bruce Banner's full intelligence in Hulk form. It's kind of weird. Yeah, and I've actually been a reader of comic books long enough to even go back to some times during like the late 80s and early 90s when Hulk walked around and wore clothes and dressed prim and proper. So I mean, this is strange even for me. But the problem I have with this is that Jim Schooter switches to him starting to lose his intelligence as the book drones on. Another subplot they kind of pepper in and out throughout the series is that Storm is butting heads with Professor Xavier over leadership of the X-Men, thanks to the Professor regaining the use of his legs when they were all teleported to Battleworld. Another issue that we also have to deal with is the fact that Ben Grimm, the Thing, loses his rock form. He ends up turning back into regular Ben Grimm, and it literally happens at some of the worst possible times. But bear in mind, this was done just to have another action figure to sell. So this really has no bearing on the story other than just being inconvenient. Otherwise, this book is one long series of fights. At some point, Dr. Doom returns and has revived Ultron and made him his bodyguard. Good lord. And Galactus spends the next few issues standing in the middle of the planet, staring into the great beyond for reasons I'll explain later, but more importantly, as the heroes suspected, Magneto takes a crack at them and abducts the Wasp. And this is where more of that misogyny creeps back up in regards to the Wasp. Magneto basically kidnaps her and takes her back to his base that he's discovered. He's squatting at this point. Magneto basically throws himself at her and forces himself onto her to the point of it being practically rape. Jim Schooter lost me on this part because Magneto just starts kissing her against her will until she pretty much just says, screw it, let's just have sex. They don't really say it in so many words, but I mean, they don't use very much innuendo to hide what's going on. That scene is very problematic for me because beyond this scene and Wasp kind of one-upping Ultron later in the story, this is really all the Wasp accomplishes, and at this point, she is the leader of the Avengers. The next arc is yet another Injustice-like scene where Spider-Man creeps up on the X-Men. While eavesdropping, he discovers that they're considering teaming up with Magneto because mutant solidarity. Spidey flips out and just goes to town on the X-Men. He's pretty much embarrassing them, and this is a roster that has some of the greatest X-Men of all time. And when I say this, I'm literally pointing towards Nightcrawler, Wolverine, Cyclops, and Storm. Like, you literally have some of the heaviest hitters in the X-Men, like some of those popular characters, and they are getting wasted by Spider-Man. This is also before he even gets the black suit. So he's still wearing the regular old red and blue suit and is literally wiping the floor with them. But because we need to drag this out another 8 or 9 issues, Xavier manages to wipe their plans from Spider-Man's memory and makes the last few pages null and void. Meanwhile, in the Hall of Randomness, or rather Doom base, Dr. Doom miracles up 2 women who were not even present up until this point. They have not been seen whatsoever up to this point. These particular women are Mary Skeeter McFerrin and Marsha Rosenberg. They do later bake their sudden appearance into the plot, but seriously, they literally just show up and are in Doom's base as if they'd been there the whole time. Doom ends up transferring power to them and they become supervillains to help give Doom an edge against the heroes and really anyone else in his way. Mary McFerrin becomes Titania and Marsha Rosenberg becomes Volcana. The big issue with these characters is that they had an opportunity to really change the game, but the creative team on this comic really failed these female characters. Now, granted, they've kind of come a long way since then, but just, man, and I'm not going to get into it right now because this is stuff that comes up in later issues. You'll hear me talk about this in a later video, don't worry. Let's go ahead and suss these powers out too, because Titania, her power set is exactly what it sounds like. She has superhuman strength, durability, the entire superhuman grab bag of powers. I mean, she can withstand bullets, she can withstand punches from the Thing and the Hulk and Thor. Like, she can take blunt force trauma that would obliterate a normal person. Since Secret Wars, she's pretty much become a rival to characters like She-Hulk and Lady Thor. Volcana, on the other hand, at least in this iteration, has the ability to convert her entire body into a plasma-like form. You see her drawn, she's pretty much drawn with like this literally like so hot that she burns white. Basically, her power is so potent that she has to wear clothes made of unstable molecules, so that way they're not destroyed whenever she, kind of turns on her Volcana form. In her plasma form, she does get the benefit of superhuman durability. She also has the ability to fire off thermal energy that is incredibly potent. While the heroes are resting on their laurels and hanging out and just, doing what heroes do when they're not fighting bad guys, Doom and his team come in full force and throw Titania and Volcana into the fight like it's nothing. And I will say this, the one thing I will give them credit for with these characters is when they come in, I mean, Volcana lays the smackdown on She-Hulk. To that point, Titania is doing the same to just about everybody else. Another good thing about this too is that we get to see Molecule Man flex his muscles a little bit more, which, I mean, that's one of those things. Like, Molecule Man's always kind of been regarded as like a joke character, even among like not just among fans, but even within like the comic universe. And it's kind of crazy because Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, under a talented and very good writer, can be a ridiculously overpowered threat. And that is actually what we get in this story. I mean, at first, yeah, Molecule Man's played for laughs, but man, this is coming up here where we're going to start getting into seeing Molecule Man start to turn scary. The heroes literally get their base destroyed by Dr. Doom and his gang. The villains technically kind of win the day on this fight. And this is also where we see Volcana and Molecule Man kind of start their budding romance, which is fine, but it becomes a little more problematic for me as it goes on. So, like I was saying a second ago about how scary Molecule Man can be, because he can literally control the molecules around him. And while the heroes are licking their wounds, the Molecule Man flexes his ultimate power and lifts a mountain just by sheer force of will. And I don't mean just a small mountain. I mean, he lifts like literally a mountain range. I mean, he's holding it over the Avengers and just drops it on them. When he does so, it's so impressive that all the villains that have been giving Molecule Man a hard time for the last few issues, they are riding his nutsack like it's going out of style. And Dr. Doom is just acting salty as hell about it. I didn't really touch on this because there's an earlier point where Thor kind of runs off with Enchantress, but I figure I'd save that for right now because honestly, it's kind of a throwaway scene. There's not really a lot going on here because Enchantress, her whole life, her whole heart's desire is to make Thor fall in love with her. But Thor sees her for what she is. And I mean, he humors her and he hangs out with her. But I mean, he just doesn't want to do anything with her because he knows what she is. He knows that she's evil. But what winds up happening is, Enchantress ends up returning with Thor back to the gang after they've defeated, the Avengers by dropping a mountain on them. And Thor's like, dude, this I cannot abide by, and is about to go to town on everybody. I mean, he's going up against Absorbing Man, he's going up against the Wrecking Crew, he is going at it, even Kang the Conqueror. And he gets a bunch of good shots in, and eventually he gets overwhelmed. But in the midst of the melee, Ultron steps in and vaporizes Thor in front of everybody, and Enchantress is just like, the fuck? And within seconds of doing this, Ultron immediately turns his power on Kang the Conqueror at Doom's behest. And this is where everybody starts going, ooh, man, we might want to kind of go back to not trusting Dr. Doom again. He might kill us. And then we flash back to Magneto, who still has the Wasp in his clutches, and she's just acting like everything's fine and dandy. But lo and behold, the X-Men show up to try and figure out how to work with Magneto and get out of this mess. And this is another one of those Injustice scenes where, Wasp finally is like, oh, I was just playing you the whole time, and zips out of there. And this is also a scene where the X-Men are kind of played up to be chumps, because she wrecks Magneto, Wolverine, Cyclops, pretty much every X-Man that was in attendance, and she steals their shuttle that they used to get there, and just takes off. And of course, because Wasp doesn't know how to fly the shuttle, she crashes, and that is the end of her for a while. Towards the end of it all, we find out that Hulk managed to stop the mountain from crushing them with his incredible strength, but we also see within the same time frame he is losing his intelligence even more and more than he was earlier. Earlier, he was just kind of suspecting that he was losing it. Now he knows he's losing it, but he still doesn't want to accept it. And everyone's pretty much kind of pointing at him like, dude, just stick to what you're good at, man. Just hold this mountain up. Focus on that. Let the smart guys figure out the rest. And they're all trying to figure out what to do, but ultimately, Reed Richards is the one who comes in and saves the day, albeit we have to disarm Spider-Man of his web shooters, because somehow he's going to make Spider-Man's web shooters enhance Tony Stark's repulsor beams. Just go with it, because comic books. Long story short, they end up getting out of the situation and blast their way out via Iron Man's repulsor beams. After they get free, Thor just miraculously shows back up and tells Captain America that he basically used his lightning-fast reflexes to just make it appear as though he was blasted. As they get free, Captain Marvel finds a village that they can go to and kind of hang out and, spend some time getting healed up. Unfortunately, this village is right by Galactus, who's, for the most part, just been kind of sitting, chilling for a while. They end up finding a shaman, probably the leader of the village, who ends up healing the wounded heroes, Human Torch specifically. And while all this is going on, the Thing just miraculously gets his rock form back. Before the Thing and Mr. Fantastic can get too excited about it, Reed Richards just looks up, and all of a sudden, he notices that Galactus has begun moving. And Galactus is like lifting his hands up to the sky. And we're going to go ahead and cut it right here. And it's one of those situations too where it's like, it's almost like that Stan Lee, find out next time, true believers moment. Because Reed Richards just points up, kind of reaches out to the sky too, and it's just like, oh no. But we're going to leave it right here. We're already getting to the 20+ minute mark. So let's go ahead and call it here. And we'll come back next time on part 2. And we'll figure out exactly what it was that was coming down from the sky that has Reed Richards all hot and bothered. Thank you so much for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, click that like button. Also, tap that circle so you can subscribe and become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers. And tap the bell button too so you make sure you get everything. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.